I've definitely hit that point from the past week of just like anytime I move more than just a minimum range of motion, it's like,
Yep.
I bent down to like grab Coco's bowl and I was just like, Butterscotch. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 188 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the maker of new podcast pages.
I'm Sam and I'm an artiste.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is Be Wary Yeti Crate 2019.
You gotta be real wary.
There's Yetis in there.
In that crate.
Yeah.
Wait, is it a crate owned by a Yeti or a...
Yes,
okay.
and full of Yetis.
Okay.
It's sort of a Russian nesting doll of Yetis.
Yeah, right.
Also, before we get started, we have a warning. Profanity. There's going to be some. It's going to be in there. It's going to be much like a crate filled with Yetis. As soon as you pop that lid, you're covered in Yetis.
Once you pop, the profanity don't stop.
Yeah. Also, we would like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. You guys are keeping our, keeping our
mics hot.
Keeping our mics.
This mic is so hot right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually,
we're just burning the money in a fire in the middle. It's that in our little painting of what the podcast looks like.
Yeah, that's
in the middle.
Money fire.
That's the money fire.
Yep.
That's where it goes.
Well, it's very cold here in St. Louis right now, so we need to...
Actually, right now it's 40 degrees, but in about 12 hours it's going to be 9 degrees.
Yes, there's a cold snap coming.
That's going to be a thing.
Yeah, and I think, our original strategy was to just dump it in a hole, in the money hole.
Yeah.
But then it got too cold, and then we had to...
Yeah,
something combustible.
Yeah. Yep. So, so that's all coming from moneygrab.bscotch.net. If you'd like to donate to support the podcast in the future, get on over there and do that. Let's get on to the episode. First, let's talk about life. We are all three on, well, for starters, Adam and Sam, you guys are feeling better. You guys were both.
You can hear it probably.
I feel better that I think I'm no longer sick, but I'm still recovering from the mucus madness that I have been inflicted with.
So sort of parts of you feel better.
Yeah.
But
I think I'm sort of conceptually better, but not actually,
Oh.
I think the disease is gone, but the damage it wrought is still there.
Sort of psychologically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And physically. It's
That's
both.
fair.
It's just,
Yeah, I feel like I've been mostly fine, and then every so often I'll just cough, like just a disgusting cough.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where has this come from?
Those real phlegmy ones?
It's just like stuck in
Those
there.
are good, though.
I mean, they are, but also they're so gross.
They're also the worst.
They're gross, but it always feels like you're making progress.
It does.
You're like, I got something out. It's good. I'm good. So since we're all kind of on the mend, we've all started embarking on our own quests for gains. So Adam and Sam, you guys are doing Orange Theory.
Yeah.
I want to hear about this. Let's tell our people about this. What is it?
Orange Theory is a thing that you do when you just want to walk into a building and have somebody tell you what to do for an hour.
Yep.
And where the things that you're doing are mostly cardio.
Yes. More specifically, it is an actual gym called Orange Theory.
Yeah.
Well, it's a company called Orange Theory.
I think so.
I don't know the difference between a company and a gym in this sort of context, but
yeah, I don't know. I had some friends who had done it here in St. Louis, and there's a bunch of locations I think nationwide, but they'd recommended it. And I was really just looking for something new this year that sort of could bust up my usual routine, because I noticed over the last 6 months that I had been exercising. It was very much the minimal effort sort, where I was like,
walk in the gym, throw something around for 20 minutes, and then be like, all right, peace.
Like, oh, wow, that was enough. And so most of my friends who had done this said, yeah, it's just the best workout I've gotten. So I went and did their trial class, and got my ass whooped so hard, and it was phenomenal. And the whole way it works, like, you get a heart rate monitor thing, and so they're basically measuring your actual effort over the course of the class. And your goal is to hit a certain number of minutes in a particular heart rate zone.
And the zone is the orange zone. Hence the name of the thing.
And in the red zone, you die.
Yeah.
So you want
to get into the red zone, they say just be careful. Take care of yourself.
With your body.
Check in with your body.
The one I had on Saturday, I was in the red zone for like 25 of the 40 minutes.
That's too many.
It was really very bad.
Red
I did not
Theory.
enjoy it. Red Theory. That was a bad day.
Red Alert. I think is that one.
But it's super fun, because the reason I think it's been good for me is we talked about some coaching and some other techniques we've used to kind of get ahead in some of the professional stuff we're doing. But on the fitness side, I haven't actually had a coach for something since, high school or, college cheerleading back in the day. And having someone just yell at you and tell you what you need to be doing is just the best, because you have to think about it.
You got another person imposing structure, setting up the rules for what it means to succeed.
And it's also different every time. So it's not
Yeah.
boring. I mean, it is still boring because it's exercise, but it's not predictably boring.
It's boring for your mind, but exciting for your body.
Yeah. It's
Maybe
so-
too exciting.
Maybe
So
too exciting.
I've really enjoyed it because I think I came out of the workout and I wasn't mentally tired, which is what actually had been happening when I would just go to the gym by myself. Because of course, when you go to the gym by yourself, I'm tracking my lifts or whatever.
You've
else
got
on
to
my
make
phone.
decisions.
I gotta know what I'm doing, all this other stuff, and so then I just show up and then get my ass kicked for an hour, and I just enjoy it a lot. It's very phenomenal.
So you can just stumble in there, completely disoriented,
Mhm.
not knowing even what day of the week it is.
And then I come
and
out
you've still got a plan.
very sweaty. Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying it.
And you guys have been doing it for how long?
Just a couple of weeks now.
Did-
3 weeks.
three or 4 weeks,
Mhm.
something like that. Yeah, I had
So-
to miss all of last week though because I was, a cesspool of
Yeah.
horrifying
This
bacterial madness.
this reminds me of CrossFit,
Mhm.
except
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
very
have
similar.
the Olympic lifting. It's
Yeah, it
Well,
doesn't have
it's
the weights.
it's pure. It's really just cardio. I mean, there's a weight component, but it's like really focused on. A third of everyone or half of everyone is just running, and then a huge fraction is rowing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then the rest is sort of mixing in some weight stuff.
yeah. CrossFit is typically they'll have a lifting or a strength training section of the day, and then they go into the workout of the day, which is like a combo. It's high intensity, so it is cardio, but there's also a lot of like squats and other things mixed in.
So I've
So-
done CrossFit before, but I think the heavy weights actually I'd never liked about it
Yeah,
because of the time pressure.
Makes you feel like I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, it feels like, it basically just to me it always felt like I was going to fuck it up and like I actually hurt myself in
Yeah.
a bad way. And I know that is relatively common with
While I'm extremely fatigued and
Exactly.
dying and
And rushing.
sweaty and rushing as fast as I can, should I put 245 plates on a bar and then throw it onto my back? Maybe,
Maybe not.
but maybe
Maybe
not.
Maybe
You know,
not.
you need good supervision.
Yeah. So I've been enjoying it a lot. And I think as far as, that idea of hitting 2019, hitting the grind, I was like, well, I'm going to try something new and see if we can like jumpstart this aspect of what I've been doing for
Yeah.
the better part of
Yeah.
10
Well,
years.
this is the first time for me that I decided to actually spend a bunch of money on fitness
On
because
health.
usually I just do whatever is the cheapest, which means in the end not doing
You get what
anything.
you pay for.
Yeah. But having a thing where it makes sense that if you're gonna pay for somebody else to be doing something and having a trainer there telling you what to do, like none of that stuff is cheap. And so I just finally decided I'm going to actually bite the bullet and just have that be a cost that I need to accept.
Investment in yourself,
Yeah.
Adam.
It's going to
Yeah.
save you a lot of money later
That's true.
when your body would have otherwise started to
Yeah.
completely fall
Well, it'll
apart.
mostly save my insurance pool more money.
That's true.
Later, which I think is it's a good ethical move. I think is to bring the collective cost of healthcare down by investing. Because even if you're spending $100 a month, which is a lot, but if you're spending that much on a gym membership, that's still way less than the cost of any of your healthcare related costs.
Yeah,
That's true.
Way less.
How you doing over there, Sam?
I'm just started coughing. I don't know what
Just
happened.
doing great.
I apologize. I'll be leaving
Yeah.
in and out.
So my journey was basically, I think about a year and a half ago, I did like a hard quest for gains where I looked up a workout and I had a whole plan and stuff. And then in the meantime, I've been doing kind of like what you're talking about, Adam and Sam, which is like spend the minimum amount,
You show up.
go to the gym like 2 or 3 times a week at most, but kind of arbitrarily. So not like with a specific agenda, just kind of be there, do some stuff, and then leave. But the problem with that is you always end up with a situation where you always come up with a reason to be
Get
done.
out. Yep.
Yeah. Like, that seemed like enough. And then you just leave. But if you got somebody there telling you what to do, then you do a lot more and it's way better for you. So I ended up looking up, I found a 12-week workout program. I started that last week. Every piece of my body is falling off. I'm in excruciating pain right now.
Mhm.
So it's good. It's working.
Yeah.
So I think it's just part of the 20 grind team, Just
Mhm.
time to just like get the work done. So otherwise, this past weekend, we did the Global Game Jam, except we didn't.
Yeah. So we had talked about on last podcast, and at the time we were planning on actually just making a new game and stuff, but we've been making all these really interesting strides with Levelhead to the point where on Friday we were basically discussing, okay, let's get geared up. We're going to go do this thing. And then we were like, we just want to work on Levelhead for the weekend.
Well, yeah, with all the changes to our production process,
Mhm.
it's been a lot more satisfying working on the stuff in the studio in the sense that I think we all feel like we have a much better sense of, much like the workout stuff. It's like we have a much better structure in place,
Right.
and we feel like we're working on the right things instead of just sort of like working. Yeah. So it's been a lot more enjoyable to do. It feels like we get much better results on a day-to-day basis that are much more future-proof and stuff. So whereas normally when a game jam would come around, we'd be like, oh yeah, we get to take a break from, the excruciating day-to-day of just being deep in the middle of this huge game project. And instead, now we're all just so pumped to work on stuff that we just decided. So we all set some goals for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So what were the goals?
Yeah. So in my case, we have this large single player campaign in Levelhead, which now has about 65 levels in it. I don't know if there's going to be more whenever it actually hits.
Well, there will have to be because it doesn't cover all the game modes.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, there will be more eventually, but as far as
there's probably going to be eventually easily 100.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, easily.
I think so.
Yeah.
And so those have been built for a while now. I built some more of them last week. But the navigation by which you sort of, go to all those different levels had been basically some really sketchy art for the better part of like a month or two. Where I'd done the basic sketches and we had gray boxed them and got everything in, but they hadn't actually been finished. And so my whole thing over the weekend was to get all those done, so that I could begin on this next big chunk of art stuff I got to do. So I finished those out on basically on Sunday morning. Was sort of finishing out the documentation and stuff for it, so that Seth could get them implemented. So that was really fun. And then I know Adam, you got the podcast page. Done.
Yeah, mine was all about
be very happy.
the podcast page. So that's been on my list for all of time. I guess.
At least 2 years.
Yeah. And I knew it needed a good chunk of time to do it. And I also knew that I could do it probably in a day if I basically just recreated the old podcast page just on our new website. But coming on the weekend, then I thought, why don't I just fucking do
You've got the weekend.
Yeah, I forgot the whole weekend if I just throw the whole thing at it. And so I did it. I remade it. It's now live at beta.bscotch.net.
/ podcast.
Yeah, if you just land there, you'll see a podcast button, so you can get there. But because we have a beta version of the site, which is where we put things that we're not sure how good and stable they are, so you can try it out there. And people have already put some questions in, and so it's all good to go. But so I made a custom player that auto plays the next one, and you can change what chronology it's going in. It also uses Rumpus to save your progress, much like Crashlands uses bscotch ID.
We've got cloud saving.
We got
our
cloud
podcast.
saving on the podcast player.
So if you move from your desktop to your phone,
and you're still signed in on Rumpus, you'll just resume right on whatever episode.
Your progress will carry with you. Yeah, you'll resume on the same episode at the same point in time.
It's that butterscotch magic, folks.
Yeah, and it'll
hashtag not giving a fuck. We'll just do whatever we want.
Do what we want. So it seems to work fine. I noticed today that it seems like weirdly slow to load new stuff, which is not my fault. That's coming from our host. And so I don't know. Maybe it's fine. I don't know. But if you just see like a bunch of zeros, just hit the play button anyway. And I think it's fine. But I'd love to get feedback on what you think about it. So hop into our Discord. You'll find links on the podcast page for everything now. Instead of having literally for the rest of time for this podcast, we can now just say
go to the podcast page,
and that would be
should we
everything.
at beta.bscotch.net should we spin up a test or like a feedback section for the podcast?
Yeah.
During these early stages.
Yep.
Yeah. So
because we need to test that system also, the testing system.
We need to test the testing system.
You'll also see when you go to the beta website at, again, beta.bscotch.net, there's a little sort of test tube icon up in the little menu bar.
Beaker.
Yeah. And so that takes you to the tests page.
We call it the feed bag.
It's called the feed bag.
It's the area where people put their feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's currently one for the website in there right now. There's an open test for that. But I guess I just should then go add one for the podcast.
We need a pod sack
there. Yep.
To put the podcast feedback in.
So again, just I want to hear how well it works or how well it doesn't. And
I think at the very least, the people who sent us angry notes about not having a podcast page should now send some thank you notes to Adam for taking the weekend
for fixing it.
It was a project. It was a big project.
It's a big project. It is. I mean, it's a hell of a lot better now.
It's so much better. It's ridiculous.
It's not even close. And since it's on a modern system where now you can sign into Rumpus instead of like weirdly going over to the forums and signing in there and coming back, and
and a lot of people
it's all integrated
in the past, and it's all really weird.
Also, who else has crossplay on their podcasts?
No one. It's just us.
Just Butterscotch.
Cross-platform.
Get out of here.
Just us. Oh, and on that note of voting, we also decided because I re-implemented voting on this thing, but we realized that we actually haven't used the voting system at all for like in recent memory, where basically people have been upvoting stuff to the top, and we still just answer just whatever we feel like. And so we're going to start a new policy moving forward, which is that we'll always answer the top voted thing on every episode.
Unless it's a weirdly personal question.
Yeah.
Or
unless it's something
other,
that we just actively just do not want
so then
to
we'll
answer.
just go down to the next one.
Yeah.
Right. But we'll always go down the votes.
Yeah.
And answer the top voted appropriate question.
Yeah. Top voted appropriate question. So now now there's a good reason to vote instead of just because it's kind of fun.
Well, and we're adding a time expiration on the questions.
Yeah.
Because in the previous podcast page, you couldn't see how long ago questions were asked, and questions never expired. So you'd end up going there and you'd see this huge pool of questions, some of which are 2 years old, maybe. You don't know. And it was kind of discouraging because you think, like, I don't know if I want to ask my question now because there's this list of 150 questions already, and mine's just going to be buried at the bottom. So we kind of wanted to implement some stuff to keep it fresh, keep it churning. And so we're setting a 4-week expiration for now, and then we'll adjust that depending on
see what happens.
Volume of questions, because we want them to all be more relevant, right?
Yep.
So that's all going to be. When are we going to switch to that officially? Should we just do it soon?
We're going to do it as soon as we know that it is generally working.
So it might even be by the time we air this episode.
No, probably not, because there won't be people using it.
Okay.
I need feedback from actual just people who go out.
Okay, so use it this week, and then hopefully next week.
Play with it this week. Give me some feedback, and then I think the plan should be that for the next episode, we'll have that fully published and live, so that it'll be switched over. But you can go ahead and start migrating your questions over too. If you have old questions on what is still podcast.bscotch.net, that will eventually change. But if you have questions that are on there right now that you still want to have answered, go find them. Go find the ones that you like and repost them back in this new system.
Re-ask. Now, don't re-ask other people's questions. That's a dick move.
It is, yeah.
Don't be a dick.
Taking them.
All right. So that's over at beta.bscotch.net. And then
podcast.
just click on the podcast link, or just go straight to beta.bscotch.net/podcast.
Yep.
All right, Seth, tell us about your weekend.
All right. So this weekend was it was largely a bug stomp. I was like, I want to just fix as many bugs as possible.
Well, let's talk about this from the production standpoint, because we have this really interesting problem, which is in our to-do pile for Levelhead. There's over 200 things. Okay.
Yeah.
There's also a backlog pile that has about 100 things in it, which we're just not worrying about right now. And then every week, or I guess between every production meeting,
we add about 50 things.
We add about 50 things into the to-do pile.
We do about 50
do about
things.
50 things.
Yep.
And so we're just sort of like
this constant treadmill.
We're in the state of
tread.
we're in the state of development where the rate of discovery of new feature opportunities and discovery of bugs and the existing sort of backlog of
just getting the work
things
done.
to finish has kept us at an even 200 to 250 tasks for months now.
Yep.
So that's kind of a thing.
So, but the interesting thing about it is that a huge chunk of them have been bugs, right? So we have these QA testers who come in every week and or work a little bit remote, and they find just all sorts of weird stuff that we haven't seen yet. And so this collection of bugs, which primarily are small things, or are sort of all maybe there's like 10 bugs that are actually tied to one problem
system,
right? And so there's been this stack of bugs that really, when we're thinking about all these cards that we have to do, it'd be nice if we could just get how could we delete just a huge chunk of these? And so we said, all right, Seth, this week is extermination duty for the weekend. How many can you kill over 3 days?
And so part of it was fixing what I would consider a local bug, which is something that's like maybe a variable name is mistyped and then it causes the game to crash, or like something that's just clearly isolated, to that one scenario. Those take 5 minutes to fix, very easy to test, and you just fix it in that one spot and then it's fixed, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got those kinds of things that you're talking about, which are bugs that are all expressions of a core problem in a
system bug,
in a game system. Yeah. And so I wanted to make sure I took some time to fix those things. One of those things was the camera path. So in Levelhead, we had this thing called a camera path where you could basically draw sort of like a line throughout your level, and the camera would then move along that path instead of following the character. So you could make levels where the player had to keep up, like those Mario levels where you're in a dungeon and the camera keeps moving, right? Except in our case, you can make the camera go anywhere you want. So you can make it go up, down, you can make it do a loop or whatever. there were a bunch of problems with that system, and we ended up with like 6 bug reports just about that. And so then Sam and I took a step back and we're like, can we fix these bugs at the systems level, but also in a way that makes the system better? Because we had a bunch of gripes about the system in and of itself. So we came up with this new concept called camera anchors. So we completely annihilated this camera path idea. And instead we made a new thing called a camera anchor, which is a little invisible object that you can put in your level, and you can turn it on and off, and it'll grab the camera. And so you could put that thing on a path, then you've got your sort of camera
Same
path.
things before. Yeah.
Or you can use it to create cinematic scenarios. So, for example, you put one of these in the middle of like a little combat arena or something. And then when the player gets in there, you turn the camera anchor on, and then all of a sudden the camera's locked into this arena, and now the player is like running around in there and fighting, and it completely changes the feel of that aspect of the level. So we did that, and we're just like, oh my God, this is a game changer. And then that opened up the next conversation, which is how do we like really take this idea of giving players, or I guess level builders, creators, giving creators more control over this sort of emotional experience in their levels. And so we're going to look into, we haven't done this yet, we're going to look into next doing boom boxes, where it's like you attach a music soundtrack, and then you can change the music in your level at certain moments. And then also weather machines, where you can like turn on a sandstorm or something like that at a certain key moment in a level. So if you have like a really chill ass part of your level, then all of a sudden you want the player to feel like everything's going sideways. You can like
kick the weather on.
All of a sudden the camera starts moving on its own. A sandstorm starts up, and then the song goes crazy, and then the player's frantically trying to get through this thing. And at the end, the weather clears up, the music becomes super nice again. And then, so you'll be able to do those kinds of things.
Some good cinematic experiences.
Yeah. So I was playing around with that stuff, and it was already, even just with the basic camera anchor, it's amazing. So I'm excited about that. And then we also added a playlist system, which is, there was always something that felt like it was missing in Levelhead, where you'd finish a level and then your only option was to quit or replay.
Yeah,
right?
Go back to the menu.
Yeah,
from which you found that.
Yeah,
level,
so
right?
The way you get into the level is through like a browser, or if you go to somebody's profile and you look at their list of levels or something and you click it there, So you entered the level through a UI, and then after you beat the level, you go back to a UI. And that always felt like it was kind of hard to get into a good groove, like a good cadence of gameplay. Because you play for a few minutes, then you're right back into decision-making mode, where you're trying to figure out, like, what do I do next, right? So what we did is we just added this simple concept just as like a stand-in, but it turned out to work great, which is anytime you see a list of levels, anywhere in the game. So you might be, like in the test lab, you might be looking at somebody's like levels that they have top scores on, or looking at levels that somebody's published or whatever. Anywhere we show a list of levels, we also spawn a play all button at the top. You click that button and it'll auto download all the levels, turn them into a series, and then you play through the whole series. So, and at the end of each level, you can just hit play next, and it just jumps you right into the next level. So now you go, instead of like 2 minutes of gameplay with 2 minutes of navigating menus, now it's just like you could play for 30 minutes at a stretch and play a great, series of levels and try to beat them all. And it's just, it's a complete game changer.
Well, I think it encourages, because one of the things that's true about user generated content in a system like this is that there's actually no way for you to know what you want to play until you're already playing it.
Yes.
And so the whole idea that we give you all these decisions to make, where you have like, you can search and sort, and you get a list, and you can now decide which one of these do I want to play. You have no decision metrics available to you to actually make a good decision there.
Yeah.
So we've basically given you this almost fake, very taxing decision that you have to make before you get to go play.
Because
you literally every play session.
Yeah, and you literally can't evaluate. You can't evaluate looking at a level and being like, would I like this?
Yeah.
Because you haven't played it yet.
The only way to know is to play it. And so by doing this, where now you can use the filters and stuff, where basically like where you are in the browser and what filters you set up, give you then the kind of game where now that's where the decision should be, is you decide what are the general kind of metrics that I want to apply to my play session, right? But then you shouldn't have to make any decisions after that, because you actually can't.
Yeah.
And so now that we've made it so you don't have to, where we still give you the illusion of choice by letting you still play a la carte. If you want to, you can just, go play specific levels. But the convenience of it is very, very different. And I think this is going to lead to people playing a lot more levels.
A lot more.
Way, way more levels.
Which is now a new problem we have to solve, right? Because part of it is like managing bandwidth costs and stuff like that. And if previously a large part of the game was this kind of awkward stumbling around through different interfaces and then finally deciding what to play after 5 minutes, kind of like being stuck on the Netflix homepage and just like looking around forever, right? That time navigating those homepages is actually good for Netflix in the sense that they're not streaming any videos at you at that time,
and they're not paying out any of their money.
So that's nice, but then like when you go into, of course what Netflix also knows is what we just learned as well, which is like when you're watching a show at the end of each episode, you don't want to be like, they don't kick you back to the homepage and make you go find the next episode. They're just like, next episode in 5.
Yeah, they
4.
they count it down.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Which we were talking about maybe doing just for fun.
Yeah.
Like, why not? Chain them together.
Yeah, just an autoplay, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of thing where now it's a different set of sort of optimization things that we have to figure out, but
it puts the play in the right place. That's the thing.
Yes, it's such a better experience.
The game is not meant to be a menu browser.
Yeah,
it's meant to be a level player. So,
well, we do have to figure out how to treat it too, because unlike Netflix, where if you watch a show, you don't want to immediately rewatch it because that would be ludicrous, right? But when it comes to playing people's levels in Levelhead, a lot of what you're trying to do is get a really good time, get a really high score, beat people on the scoreboard or whatever. And so we also want to encourage you to replay levels as much as we can. And so things like an auto play next actively discourages people from trying to do the best possible that they can do.
So there's a balance to
we have to kind of figure out how that's gonna behave.
Yeah, and this does kind of speak to one of the requests we've gotten from people is the ability to chain levels together into some kind of a playlist. Mm-hmm. So now the game just does that inherently in every possible scenario. We still don't have any kinds of manual mechanisms for creating your own playlists, and that's something we've been wanting to do. It's currently not part of the plan, just because of basically like UI and UX questions.
Bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, it's technically all fine.
It's easy. Like it's literally just a list.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's like, well, how do you manage the list? Where do you put it? How many can you store?
Well, especially because
can you look up other people's lists?
Yeah. And the way that it would have to work is that you would basically have to have played levels to know if they're any good, right? Before you could put them into your own playlist. And so there would have to be some mechanism by which inside of a level you can say, cool, I want to, bookmark this for potential future putting into a playlist, or put it right into a playlist that already exists maybe, or maybe I just start a new playlist right now because I love this level and I make one and I name it, and then this is the first one that goes in there that you keep on adding. I don't know. What is it going to look like?
It's a really weird UX problem, so I don't know if we'll be tackling that yet.
But we now have the baseline concept in there. Yeah. So that emerged out of this weekend of jamming. And then otherwise, Sure has been hard at work on this automatic build pipeline where anytime we need to get the game into hands of like testers or whatever, and this is also a problem with Crashlands and all of our older games, which is at a certain point after we're done developing them, we have to give them to people. Like we need to get them out into the market. And right now our mechanisms for doing that are manual. Like they're very cumbersome. So if there's a new like every November there's a new iOS version, right? We have to make sure that Crashlands is up and running. And so we have to like make a manual build and then do that whole process, and it's very time intensive. And we were kind of talking earlier this year, and then also toward the end of last year, like with things like the Epic Store, you got Discord, like you got all of a sudden there's a lot more potential market fragmentation. And one of the strategies that a lot of studios will find useful going forward is coming up with ways to just get their game sort of shotgun approach, right? Yeah. Just get your game to as many places as possible. But then the cost of that is the testing and the deployment, right? Yeah. If it takes you an hour to make a build and get it ready for upload to a store, and you're on 30 different stores, well, say goodbye to a full work week every time you want to get your game out.
And most of the stores are not going to make you any money, actually.
Yeah.
But it's all an ROI thing, right? So if it takes you a few hours to make an update, put on a store. And then there's also going to be a feedback loop where for some reason something goes wrong on that store specifically. So you have to come back and fix it and then make a new batch. So the cost of deployment to a new store, even if it's almost the same as another store, is non-zero and can be very, very high. I think it's something that people, especially in the indie scene, including us, haven't paid a lot of attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of just think, hey, just put your shit on everything because that's the best way to do it.
Put it on itch. Put it on
whatever.
God,
Everything.
put it on Humble.
But what we found is that some of we have stores, right? We have stores with that Crashlands is on that actually just cost us more to manage builds on than we make in return. And so, but a lot of that has to do with because it's a cost and return problem, right? Is our costs are too high. Because we don't have.
It takes too long to build the damn thing.
It takes too long to make builds, and the process is not standardized enough. It's not robust enough. There are too many places that errors can creep in, and there's not an automated QA component. And so the cost for us to deliver a build to any platform is just too high.
Yeah. So we set out to start solving that problem. Of course, we can't solve the whole problem all at once. We need to kind of work our way toward it. So the first phase of that is the automatic build pipeline. The idea being, as we're working on a game, at any point we could say, hey, I've finished up this set of features or this set of bug fixes. It's time to deploy this to be tested. And I should be able to just hit a button and then continue working. And then just know that in the background, whatever needs to happen to get the game into the hands of testers is now happening, right?
And it's going to be automatic, so it's going to be the same every time you do it.
And I don't need to set up my machine uniquely to make a build.
Yeah,
and then,
ideally, you could then just go home, continue working on the build, do the same thing, and then
I don't need to customize. I don't need to set up anything on my home machine, anything. Yeah, and so we've got that. We've got that part done now, and so we went from our previous process was about every Thursday I would take the last couple hours of the day and put together, patch notes and a build for our testers and stuff. And then ship that off to them and get the QA test ready to go. And that was an expensive enough process that we were deploying large patches with a large sweeping set of changes in them once a week, which meant that also the testers couldn't do anything past like Tuesday because now the build is expired. It's old and the game has changed enough. Right. And now all I have to do is I just basically push a code commit with a new version number, and then boom, patch notes are automatically generated. Build gets made. Build gets auto deployed to the testers. And it's on a different machine, so I don't need to wait for my machine to be done chugging away.
So
on
now
it.
I think we push 3 builds on Saturday or something like that.
Yeah, we're doing 3 builds a day.
Yep. Yeah.
And it costs nothing now.
So Phoenix Project. For those who read that book,
it's all about that DevOps.
Yeah, this is all a big part of our developer ops.
That
push.
small batch. Is
the idea that if a tester's like, oh, this thing is causing this aspect of the game to just completely crash, we should be able to go, no problem. And within 10 minutes, they've got a new build that has been hotfixed.
Within however long it takes to fix the problem. That's basically the idea is that whenever a problem comes up, as long as it takes to fix the problem is as long as it should take to get into the hands of the
right. And then the 10 minutes to actually compile it. But
yes, yeah. That's what I mean. That's the goal. The goal is that there should be that the only time taken to solve any problems in building software is the mental time taken to solve the problem.
Right.
And everything after that, you're trying to tighten up and automate and make as fast as possible, so that whatever that time is left over, you just keep on cutting into. With automated deployment.
So ideally. So our goal is to get this to a point where we're able to do things like, maybe we had a new Crashlands thing happen. We want to deploy, start testing it or whatever. We just push it out and then boom, it's in test flight on iOS. It's in a Google Play beta channel. It's on a Steam beta branch,
Right.
And we build in a good feedback collection system as well. That's all integrated into Rumpus or something like that. And so we can then rapidly deploy updates and hotfixes and stuff and get that into a really stable state really fast and then just get it out. Right. And so far it's working. And the amount of mental overhead that I've been able to clear out and just focus on development is already just ridiculous. It's crazy. It's crazy how much better it is. So I'm super excited about that. So I'd say overall our game jam, we didn't make a game, specifically.
Yeah. We made more game.
We made more of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good. We got good, big things ahead. I'm excited. All right, let's get on to some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. And actually, the first question we're going to answer comes from beta.bscotch.net from the new podcast page. And I guess our future questions are going to come from there as well.
Well, the future questions will, those come from the new system, but that will again be available at podcast.bscotch.net.
Right, but for now, it's
traded.
For now, it's at beta.
Yeah.
So the first question from the new site comes from Angrymuffin, who asks, so I asked that question like a year and a half ago. So to alleviate confusion and add context, could you answer that question before this one? That would be great. Thanks. We cannot, because we're answering this one, and now
We have no reference.
And also, this did not alleviate any
this
confusion.
did create a large amount of confusion. Some would
Context
say.
has not been provided nor
Context
built.
Context you could say it's been destroyed. I don't know what's happening.
Me neither.
I'm very disoriented, and I
this is
feel
kind of a-
nauseous. I don't know. Is that
This is just kind of a good example of it's easy when you're writing a question in the context of the podcast feed. This is part of the reason for us wanting to have a churn, so we clear them every 4 weeks or whatever. Is that you'll go in there and you'll write a question, because you'll have just listened to the podcast or something. There'll be something on your mind about it. You'll go and you'll ask a question related to it without providing the full context needed for somebody who wasn't right there with you, listening at the same moment, thinking about the same thing.
And keep in mind, we forget literally anything we say.
Oh my
Yeah,
god!
so it's
the
10
moment I
minutes
walk out of this room, this
gone.
did not happen.
right? So it's possible that Angrymuffin did in fact ask another question a year and a half ago that he wanted us to answer first. However, we don't know what that is because remember, we also don't have timestamps on those little questions.
Yep.
So
who knows?
either that's the case, or he knows that we don't know and he's trolling us.
Whenever I get home on Mondays, my wife is like, "How's the podcast today?" Because she listens to it on Wednesdays, and I'm always like, "That was good." And then she'll say, "What did you guys talk about?" And I'll like squint for a little bit, and I'll maybe have like a word or two vaguely about a subject, and then it gets to Wednesday, and she'll listen to it, and I'll be like, "How was it? What did we talk?
What
about?
did we talk about?
How was it?"
So this is weird, but so our podcast is usually processed and ready to go roughly by end of day Monday. So oftentimes when I'm driving home on my Monday commute, I will re-listen because I remember absolutely nothing about what we talked about. Like I just completely put it out of my mind. And even though I'm listening to it in the same freaking day that it happened, it's like a whole new experience.
I was doing my weekly review yesterday, like looking back on last week, and I completely forgot that I had built 15 levels on Monday and Tuesday for the game. I completely forgot.
That's because you trust in your processes, right? Everything's in Trello. Everything is.
It was weird because I was like, because one of the things is, what's your top accomplishments from this week? And I was like, I don't remember
what did I
anything.
do?
Yeah.
I don't think I did anything. And then I looked back, I was like, oh wow, no, I did a bunch of stuff. I just can't remember anything. It was nuts.
Yep.
That is pretty nuts.
I get more of those fish oils going, I think, because my brain's deteriorating.
I don't know. I don't think.
I think it's if you don't have to worry about things and they're not sitting in your brain pan and then you forget them.
It's
I think
not
it's
that-
completely fine.
It's not that you can't remember things.
You don't
It's
need
that
to.
you're just not remembering those things.
That's true.
Because I mean, we just memorized our studio principles.
We did.
I still haven't sat down to do that yet. I got to actually.
You want to talk about that? You want to talk about
I
that?
mean, we can if you want. Yeah. So as part of our new ops sort of thing, we're coming up with some of these other ways to, I guess, kind of better embed some of our cultural stuff and our business principles into everybody in the studio. And so one of them was this idea of, well, we've had these principles for a while, so let's memorize them actually, so that because we try to recall the list, we couldn't actually, which is kind of silly, right? If you have principles and you can't remember what they are, they don't exist. That's kind of a fact. So
Because then you're not conjuring them up to
Well,
use
because
them.
they're sort of descriptive of how we just hope we're behaving.
Yes.
Instead of guidelines we use to make decisions about it.
So everything we're trying to do this year is like actually behave the way you're intending to, as opposed to these vagaries. So
Get on that grind.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's related, but
It does seem like a good
Memorization is clearly a grindy task.
Well, so no, actually, that's the thing. Is that so the best way to memorize things is to
if you have visual memory,
if you have visual memory. So this is the rough part for Adam.
it is a grind for Adam.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about this. Yeah. So basically, what I did was on Thursday last week, I sat down and I just made what's called a memory palace walk for memorizing the principles. And what it does is you physically or sort of in your mind, you walk from someplace you know to some other place you know. So in our case, from the parking lot in front of our building up to the studio.
So let's cover the first like 5 or 6 principles.
Okay. So
we can get a sense of what it's like to have a memory palace.
okay, well, so yeah, I'll just
walk through it.
I'll walk through it. So you park in the parking lot, right?
Uh-huh.
You get out of your car and you see this guy, and he's like sweating profusely, but he's grinning like a maniac, and he's like, he is mining out this huge diamond
Just out of the parking lot.
The parking lot, there's just a huge diamond just there, you know?
Because why wouldn't
So he's
there?
got a big pickaxe.
And he's just like going for it, and he just loves the work. So that's
He's
number
just
one.
having a great time.
Mhm.
Principle number 1, love the work.
And then you walk over to the gate to exit the parking lot, and there's this big, crazy deity thing standing there. It's got 2 arms, like almost like up like field goal posts, because it's number 2.
Number 2, principle number 2.
And you have to bow to it in order for the gate to open, because it's about being humble.
You have to be humble. Principle
Yeah.
number 2.
And then you walk out on the street, and you immediately find some litter, right? So
There's
like
garbage.
there's like some candy wrappers. There's like a shitty free-to-play mobile game.
Uh-huh.
Just all sorts. So you
Just
scoop all
garbage.
that up, and you dump it in the trash because you're being considerate.
Be considerate. Principle
Yep.
number 3.
Okay, and then you walk
That's why there's
across-
3 pieces of trash.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you walk across the street, and you open the door for Maximus Aurelius,
Uh-huh.
You know.
From Gladiator.
Gladiator, and you
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Yeah, you can help him out getting into the building, which is maximizing your independence, right, as a studio.
Yeah. In this
And
case,
then-
you're maximizing Russell Crowe's independence
So it's all about that.
by, being considerate,
Mhm.
actually.
And then you get into the building, and that first sort of opening entryway, there's 5 people standing on top of a huge lever that's sort of fulcrumed into yet another giant diamond that they're trying to get out. And this one's about, highest leverage first. This is number 5. You do the highest leverage thing first because they're trying to pry this
That's why
thing.
there's 5 people. Principle
Exactly.
5.
And then you open the door to the front entryway, and there's a huge mirror in the shape of a 6. And you look at it, but you can't see yourself because you know what? It's not about you.
It's not about you,
That's
which
a,
is
that's a new one.
is a new principle that we added
Yep.
as we were revisiting.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing you do is
So
you,
there's 13 of these in total.
yeah. So you think through a place that you know, a place that you're very familiar with, or a common route that you walk or travel.
Mhm.
And you just put weird stuff
You put
alongside it.
very memorable, weird stuff in it.
That also embeds other information. Like the total, like the number of things involved is somehow related usually with.
Yeah. Because it's stupid, but like memorizing 2, be humble
Yeah.
is for some reason really fucking hard. But memorizing the concept of a weird deity standing in front of a gate that you have to bow to
Mhm.
in order to be humble and then be allowed through the gate,
Mhm.
that is very fine. That's fine for our brains to handle.
It's one of my favorite
for some
quotes
reason.
because I read a few of these memory books about how to memorize things. And one of my favorite quotes from it was that the limit is not your memory. The limit is your creativity, because inputting things into your brain in a really creative way is what allows you to pull them out really easily. So if you're trying to memorize things where you're just like, well, I'm just going to go over this list. I'm just going to go over this list for the next 45 minutes.
You have a
You're
hard
wasting
time.
your time, and it sucks and it's horrible. But if like this took me 20 minutes to do, and
But
then
how do you handle things that are now out of sequence? So if I just say like number 8, does that mean you walk through your palace real fast to get to number 8, or because they're a way you can now?
Well,
just,
no, because then what
pull it out of
happens is, so like, for example, because there are aspects of those things that are connected to the number as well.
there?
So like, I know that number 9 is take the time to go fast, because I can also remember the fact that Sam puts his bowl of soup or curry or something
Mhm.
into the microwave and sets it for 9 minutes.
Yep.
And then the microwave cooks it instantly.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's the event from
this
the
is the trick,
sequence.
because actually when
Yeah.
you said that, I remember the magic 8 ball that's used in that one.
Right.
So again, because
So you gotta embed all the information that you can to
Yeah.
pull the thing out of there.
which is why it takes a little bit of time, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of those comical things where like literally it took me.
It's also
20
way more
minutes.
fun than just rereading flashcards or
Oh,
something.
yeah. So it took me 20 minutes to do this, and then I was sort of like giggling internally about it, and I tried it the next day when I was driving into the office, just sort of mentally ran through it, got through it just fine, and then I told everybody about it, and then I walked the team through it, and
And we all had it memorized also.
everyone was giggling. Yeah. And then the next day, so I guess at the end of the jam on Saturday, I was like, all right, before I leave, I was like, sure, what are the principles? And he just like, boom, just went through all of
they
them.
just listed it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Because it turns out, you got to understand the constraints of the system that you're working with.
Mhm.
And in this case, it's that the human brain evolved as a storyteller,
Yeah.
not as a computer.
Not as an information processor.
Yeah. So use stories to memorize things. Makes sense?
More fun, works better.
Yeah.
Though I think we'd be remiss if we don't play out the last scene of the
yeah.
of
So the
sequence.
last scene,
The
for-
last
for
principle.
principle 13,
Uh-huh.
you walk up the steps
Uh-huh.
in the hallway or in the stairwell, and you open the door, you step out, and Steven Seagal snaps your neck. Okay. But he actually just sort of chiropractically aligns your spine.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
Because you need to align yourself.
Yep.
Principle 13.
Yep. So again, you just make up ridiculous
In this
shit.
case, though, you're not aligning yourself. Steven Seagal is aligning you. But,
Hey, maybe
it's
you pay for it.
tomato. Know what I mean?
Well, but again, it's all about it's about the metaphorical understanding.
Yes.
You get enough information that you can retrieve the actual exact thing.
Yeah. It's easier to reconstruct a story, or sorry, to reconstruct a fact out of a story than it is.
No, but first he has to say, "This is your unlucky day," because it's number 13.
This is your unlucky day. But then he aligns your spine.
Yeah, and it turns out it's fine.
He's a great chiropractor.
Yes.
Little known fact.
So I don't know how we landed there. But anyway, next question comes from RetroBananaManNL.
Wait, is this from the new podcast page or the old podcast?
This is from the old one.
Okay.
So this is going to be the last round of questions from the old podcast page.
Cast.
Yeah. So migrate your questions over. Ask some new ones.
Yeah. RetroBananaManNL says, you always say game jams are the way to go to get ideas and practice game making. You also say you need to take the time to reflect after a game jam. How do you do that? Do you write it down, work more on the project, or any other way? And how much time should you set out between jams to reflect? Love the podcast.
We usually do, right afterward, we usually just talk about it.
We usually spend the day, like the next whole day.
Yeah. If there's, and you'll say, there's not really a list, I guess. It's not really a codified process, but it's just, what did you see that worked well this weekend? What was like, because usually we discover some new piece of tech or some new process improvement, whatever
New
else.
ideas that we might want to pursue.
Yeah. And so it's about, how can we bring that into whatever this big project is? Or how can we use this little idea for a piece of tech you had? Does that apply? Does that apply to this other system we're using?
Or even
a new
like
approach that you started testing out and asking about how that went. And it's really more about kind of exploring what happened, trying to kind of recap.
Yeah.
Well, you want to say like,
ask like, how do we milk this for all it's worth?
What went well, and then how do we sort of turn
Capitalize
turn that into something we can do well again and do more of, and also what went badly, and then why, and are there other systems we can make to keep that kind of thing from happening in a bigger way in bigger projects, right? And also a big part of it is going back through the code and looking through like new tools and new functions that we created and migrating them into new projects. My approach for that actually has been whenever we're doing a game jam, I always make a folder that's just called convenience. And anytime I come up with something that's like a really nice tool or a convenience function or whatever, because the project hierarchy, the actual structure of the project doesn't fucking matter in a jam.
Right.
Like I don't care where scripts are going, because this project only needs to live for just a minute. Right. So then at the end I go through that entire list and then I clean up those scripts, I document them, and then I migrate them into the.
So you're actually building
back.
that as you go, as opposed to retroactively. Then,
yeah. So that way I don't need to remake the decisions and go through the entire code base later. So that's that's a good way to do it. I
think knowing what is happening when you go into it is really helpful, because that whole approach of also just letting it be chaos only works if you are definitely not going to try to convert that same project into some ongoing project.
Yes.
If your goal of a game in a particular game jam is to create the seed of some project that you want to do, and you don't want to have to redo it when you leave the jam, then you don't get to do that.
You will need to.
Yeah, you'll need to have structure. You'll need to actually take the time to go fast, as we say, right? So just you'll end up with maybe less product at the end of it, a smaller feature set, but it'll be something that you can now iterate on and work on into the future,
instead of just being generally disappointed about how stuck it is.
Yeah.
So. All right, next question. We actually have two questions paired together.
Oh, geez.
CoffeeChemist says, so the UK has the first game dev union. I'm very curious about what the bscotch bros think of it. And Woland77 asks, game developers should probably unionize. Unions are great, but you are all indies. What do you think? Would unionization in the AAA dev world impact indie developers? Do you see any benefits or complications coming your way if that were to happen?
So let's talk about the reason why this is happening.
Crunch. DevOps.
DevOps.
Crunch and low pay.
Yeah. So
coupled together.
Yeah. So it's a combination of, in a lot of AAA scenarios, developers are required essentially to crunch. And what that means, so we do game jams, right? And the interesting thing about a jam is essentially crunch over a weekend, right?
Yeah.
But
it's 2 days long.
2 days you're just working the whole time. but you opt into it, and it's also fun.
And we still
it's
only
designed
work
for
like
fun.
10 or 12-hour days. It's not
Yes,
because the extended crunch you hear about in the industry is not only extended, but it's also like 12 to 16
it's
hour
the whole
days.
day.
Yeah, it's the
the whole waking day, and it's pretty heinous in terms of like, I mean, the overall effects on your dev team is obviously really bad. The total amount of work output you get is obviously very bad. Like it doesn't do anything, but it looks real good from a publisher standpoint. If you're like, well, we got our whole team crunching back home, so like they're working really hard on it. It's this weird.
It's like a pride point.
It's a pride point, yeah, where it's like, yeah, we're working so hard on this. Like our guys are literally passing out at their keyboards.
Yeah, so we might not be working smart, but I'll be doing a good job. But we're working hard.
You also hear about people selling their houses or moving to new apartments that are adjacent to the studio, so that because otherwise like if their commute is like 15 minutes long, then that's not acceptable because they.
Although
cutting into the crunch
a lot of
time.
these are in places where your commute's going to be like an hour because it's too expensive to live in the city. You're not being paid very well, and the whole thing.
And so I mean,
I
the
think
whole
Blood,
thing is
Sweat, and Pixels. The book has
they go into it.
They have a number of crunch stories.
Yeah, they go into quite a bit, and so it's still very pervasive. Like as much as people say it's been getting better and stuff, it still is very bad. I think generally in the industry, and you still hear like probably every month or two, there's some crazy story about this team was crunched for 6 months straight or whatever else.
And then everybody got fired after the game
got laid off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Great payoff.
There's definitely some really just kind of fucked up.
Yeah, there's pay problems, there's job security problems, there's crunch problems. There's just like all the kinds of problems you would think of that sort of require unionization representation to deal with are very present.
Yeah.
Well, and then also rampant sexism, rampant every kind of basically every kind of hatred you could have is very
still just there,
very prevalent.
So I think there is very much a need for it, as I think Woolen pointed out, for the developers to actually have some power in terms of determining what those basic level of benefits are and that sort of thing for themselves, as well as various protections. Because I think that's the upsetting thing about it, is that you have to as a group opt into being a big group in order to get protection from the people who are employing you, which is just kind of a weird reality of kind of, I guess, how capitalism tends to drift,
I think there's two unfortunate sides of this. One is that I do think that these kinds of things are necessary in a lot of cases. And this
unions,
I assume unions, yeah. And this is one of those cases. If you are paid at half of, like if you're a programmer in games, you're paid like half of what you would be paid as a programmer in pretty much any other industry.
Which could be fine if you weren't also crunched to work.
Right. If you want to do the math, if you're paid half as much and work twice as much, you are at a 75% deficit here, right? You're only getting like a quarter of what you should be. And that's bad. That's a real bad thing. And obviously, and I think because of the fact that, people are willing to do it, and it creates this kind of like one-upmanship culture where it's like, you don't want to be the person when everybody's crunching. You don't want to be the person to clock out at 5 o'clock every day and go to the gym and eat a good meal and get a good night's sleep and be healthy.
See your family
and stuff. Because you're not making the sacrifice that everybody else is making, and you're going to be fired.
Yeah.
So I think having the union, having those kinds of things would push companies to actually think about how to utilize their human resources, in a more humane and effective kind of a way via things like working on their DevOps pipelines to try to ensure that the work is done in a more efficient and effective way, so people don't have to work 100-hour weeks and stuff like that. I think that's all good. I think the downside is that I think that's important and necessary now. The downside of these kinds of things
is the problem that at some point unions aren't needed anymore.
At some point, the
problem
instead. Because any organization that exists to solve a problem will eventually become the thing that extends the problem. Because if an organization is founded for that purpose, then if the problem is solved, then the organization doesn't need to exist anymore, right?
But it will continue to, because that's how things work.
So a lot of times what you'll see is some of these organizations that have met their goal, they will persist forever. And they'll oftentimes start lobbying against things that would actually improve conditions. Because if people don't need, for example, to be in the union to still get all these benefits and stuff like that, then the union doesn't get any dues. And then all of a sudden the organization collapses.
Mandatory. Right? And so, that's part of it too, is like, for a union to work, it has to like everybody has to be in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes a non-optional.
Then you got to
thing.
force people to join,
Yep.
and then that's
And
the
then
problem.
if you don't agree with what the union is doing when it's representing you at some point, because like at the beginning, of course, like things are so shitty at the beginning that like anything the union does is going to be better than where you are, right?
Mhm.
But at some point, it's going to be moving like sideways, probably, or even doing things that you disagree with, or acting actually against your best interest because
Like
they
making it hard or weird.
Yeah, or because at some point, because unions increase costs of all kinds of stuff, and for mostly for good reasons, because they make people get paid better,
Yes,
right?
correct.
But it also decreases the number of people who get employed. It adds a barrier to entry into the industry now, because now you have to go through a union to do it, and so it actually it increases a lot of complexity and makes life more difficult for
A lot of
people,
people.
for a lot of people in
Yeah.
a lot of different ways, and it makes life more difficult for companies because now they have to manage
Mhm.
union.
It will make
stuff.
it will make it harder to start a game dev company. There's a lot of tricky stuff that comes along
Yeah.
with it.
So
It's like if you're already in the industry and you're already one of those people crunching and all that shit,
Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
great.
it's gonna be great
Oh,
for you.
yeah.
If you are already fine and you're already playing by the rules or whatever, and
It's-
you're being ethical,
It's just going to be a hit.
it's just gonna be a big problem.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about it in terms of what does it mean for changes for us. I don't think it means much. I think I'm very excited for people to not have to be crunched for 6 to 12 months at a time. But I do recall, so as far as speaking to the kind of the interesting thing that happens usually in the later
run.
life of a union. I remember we did a film festival weekend thing. What are those called?
A 48-hour film festival.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a film jam, basically, a couple of years ago. And one of the people who happened to be on our team, we were all just like randomly met up at this thing, randomly picked people, happened to be actually a gilded actress with the SAG Actors Guild.
Screen Actors Guild.
Guild.
Yep.
And we almost couldn't. And she didn't reveal this until we were almost done with the project.
It was one of those like, oh, is this going to be a problem kind of thing? And we look it up
Yes.
and it turns out, yes.
It's a huge problem. And so,
So she was just doing this for fun.
yeah.
But because she was acting in a film,
Yeah.
even if it was an amateur thing on the weekend.
Then our team during that 48 hours, on top of building and editing the entire film, had to talk to, I think, do you
talk
remember
to
what
some
happened?
representatives,
A bunch of
do
back and forth, sign a bunch of
research.
papers and stuff saying that this was like okay, that this is all fine and stuff. Which again, good on the protection side.
Now imagine doing that in a game jam.
Yeah.
The first 6 hours of the jam is talking with union reps.
shit.
Yeah, dealt
Yeah.
with.
So I mean, again, there's
Yeah.
these weird things there, but I think I think it's the Matomi Park who made Slime Rancher. The guy was talking about this recently about the unions idea. And he, like most people, was super into it. And he just said, what all they're doing as far as how they do their benefits and things like that is they just try to do really well. And then if there's anything that the union probably would offer or like require that they don't offer, then they see that as for themselves as something that they're lacking in, and then they just beef it up. So his whole point was that it actually should change absolutely nothing from a business standpoint. It should change absolutely nothing if you're doing your stuff right.
And I believe when we were at PAX, we were also talking with people about stuff like getting their booths set up and stuff.
Mhm.
And in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, the people who organize the conference are the people who are employed to construct and help set up the conference in the booths. They're unionized.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, that's true at every major convention.
right. And they'll put in all kinds of rules like you're actually, and this is what was reported to us by the people
Yeah.
who were setting up their booths, is that even if you've got like a box or something that you want to set up in your own booth, you cannot personally physically bring it into the building.
Right.
You need to pay a unionized worker to do that, even if you're perfectly capable of it and you're already going into the building anyways.
Yep.
And if you try to go around those rules, then there's a big problem. Yeah. So,
But it also costs a shitload of money.
Yeah,
For
so
them to
a
move
lot.
a box like 40 yards or something, it will cost you a tremendous amount of money.
yeah. And so this is one of those, like, this is now a problem created by the fact that this union is now sort of like strong arming its way into trying to squeeze money out of every scenario,
Well,
which is not good.
Yeah, I mean, conventions are already very expensive, but a huge reason for that is the enormous cost of the labor involved.
Right.
And again, like people should be getting their fair share, definitely. Like, I have nothing against people getting paid well for doing hard labor, but I do have a problem with not being allowed to do things. That's
if
the
you're
part that
like,
bugs me.
I brought a box to this convention, I'm carrying it right now. As soon as I enter the premises, I'm no longer allowed to continue just holding this freaking box. But now I got to pay somebody.
But I'm
crap
sure it's
load of
because
money.
one of those things where at some point the union didn't have that rule in place, and people just hired a bunch of like temp people for like $7 an hour.
Yeah.
Like, I'll carry all boxes.
That's why we
of-
can't have nice things.
Yeah. So you get, I think this is the shitty thing about it is it's like it ends up becoming this arms race. And the reality is that
And then just
there's a lot of ways to create
So
it.
yeah, it's easy to just point the finger at a union and be like, they're being bad. And it's like, no, everybody's being bad. Everybody's being a dick. And now we got to have all these stupid rules.
Yeah. So I'm excited for it, but also there's going to be weird stuff that they're weird externalities.
It's just like there's nothing you get to do that's only a win.
Yeah.
You know, but I do think that unionization in general is always a net win.
Yeah.
Certainly at the beginning. I think later on, even still, even though I think it creates a lot of waste, as you said, at some point once it becomes really.
But at least you got somebody in your corner.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it generates waste so the cost is a lot of waste generated and a lot of headache, but the benefit is protection of people who otherwise might not be able to be protected. So I do think it's a net win in general, though. The stories can be very frustrating sometimes.
Yeah. Yep.
certainly.
There's always externalities.
Yep.
So, all right, let's do one quick final question, which also comes from Angrymuffin. Angrymuffin says, in episode 137, you talked about having a Blizzard subscription instead of a WoW subscription, and that would be okay, and maybe even feel less like buying a product. You hinted that this may be the future of Rumpus. This was a year ago.
Maybe this is the question he's referring to.
Oh, maybe. Can this possibly be so? I would gladly subscribe to the Butterscotch League instead of or in addition to buying your games. But is this something that would be widely accepted or cripplingly rejected?
I think in the end, the short answer is it doesn't actually matter because we just can't.
That's true.
Yep.
Because of cross-platform nature.
Because of cross-platform.
Yeah, it would work for something like Blizzard only on PC. You wouldn't be able to. Well, maybe. I mean, a company like Blizzard could swing it. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
like they could set up, a subscription for something on desktop, and then somehow that would also apply to Xbox or something like that.
Well, they could swing it technically, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be allowed to do it on the platform.
Yeah.
We know PlayStation wouldn't let them do it. Definitely, we know
That's
Apple
true.
wouldn't let them do it. Definitely.
Well,
Xbox,
it is
suspicious.
allowed. It is allowed in a lot of cases. So, for example, like if I want to subscribe to HBO Go or whatever, I can do it directly through the HBO website, and it gives me an account, and I'm subscribed there, no problem. I can download the app on my phone, and I'm still subscribed. Or I can get the app on my phone, subscribe through that, and now I'm subscribed through Google, and so Google's taking the 30% cut.
Wasn't there some company that increased its costs on mobile to account for the 30% cut of the store?
I don't know. That's a bold move.
I'm pretty sure one of them, there was like a big fight with Apple, I think, for a while because they were doing
because it's not parity or whatever.
Yeah.
So the model already exists, or even just the case that like I could have an Android phone and an iPhone, and then I could subscribe to HBO or Netflix even through my phone, and then go to the other phone and still be subscribed.
Yeah, I do think it's certainly possible for that to be a thing. I think this year and next year is going to be really interesting because there's all these, like, everyone's trying to do this streaming thing, and it's coming off in like a variety of interesting ways. A bunch of subscription models too that are not streaming related, but are subscription models for like huge chunks of games.
Well, you got like Discord Nitro, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of this stuff that's kind of happening.
EA Origin,
but I don't. EA Origin, but I don't know. You just never know. I don't know. Is it going to work? Do people care?
Well, there's a question too of the kind of product.
Yes.
So we had talked in the past about Discord Nitro feeling kind of weird, where Netflix or like other streaming or subscription services where you're watching videos,
it's easy to pop in and just watch for.
Yeah, it's very passive, and so you hop in there, you watch some stuff, you're like, yeah, no problem, and it's fine. And actually, like the subscription model for watching things has historically been the case forever because of cable TV and things like that, right? It's very common, very widely accepted. A game is a low involvement purchase, but a high involvement product.
Yeah,
in the sense that
you got to learn it.
Yeah, when people buy a game, they actually don't make that decision with very much thought. It's often like, does it have a good review score? Did the screenshots look fine?
Did I see a YouTuber play it and have fun?
Yeah. And it doesn't really take a lot of investigation before somebody decides whether or not they're going to buy a game, right? It's not like a car where you're like doing all kinds of research and test drives and other shit, right? But once you have the game, you got to get in there.
You get to learn it. Well, I think this is an interesting
thing. You
can
can lose.
I'm sure some of our people have experienced this too before. Where like if you get a new game, you can be excited about it, but also not want to play it. Maybe on the nights that you have to play it because you have to learn.
There's a hurdle.
There's a huge hurdle.
You got to give yourself a couple hours.
Yeah, the first like 2 or 3 hours of a really good game tends to be kind of befuddling and confusing, where you're kind of like, wading through the systems and figuring out how the help thing works before you can really enter into that flow state and have a really good time. So there is that question of like, if you, with Discord Nitro, for example, you get like these 20 plus games or whatever else that you can just go play right now. There's always a question of,
well, it feels like there's too much.
Yeah.
And there are a number of games in Discord Nitro that I have actually kind of had in the back of my mind for a long time where I'm like, oh, I'd love to play that. I'd love to play whatever. And then now I've got it.
Yeah. I've still played no games on my Discord Nitro.
Yeah.
0.
And you've got them.
You've got
1,000 games on there. That's more. You got more games on there than you have in your Steam library.
Are there 1,000 Nitro games?
I think so. The subscription
6,000? I don't know.
I think it's way less.
Yeah,
100.
There's just like a couple dozen. I think.
Oh no!
Sure.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Total games versus Nitro games, because there's a store that's
Right.
got a few hundred games on it,
Yeah.
and then there's the Nitro.
Yeah, I mean,
subsection.
even if it's 50 games, that's a fuckload
It's still
of
a lot,
games,
yeah.
And the idea that in that mix is games that you have had on your Steam wish list, maybe even like games that you've been excited about in the past, and you now just have the free opportunity to play them. But it just feels like the cost of getting in there is so high.
Yeah, I think it turns out that the cost wasn't really the money all along.
It was
really
the
what
time.
It was the time. Yeah,
The
and there's something that suddenly just gets revealed. Actually, I think it's because the problem is that now when there's also cost involved,
Well, it's time and effort. Like it's not like
Yeah.
Netflix where it's just time.
right, it's time and
Period.
effort. But yeah, when it comes to actually buying the thing, then now the only things that you can play are the things that you've bought. Right, which restricts your library enormously to the number of things you can play. And then when you're out in the world, they're trying to choose what game you can get. It's actually easier to buy the game than it is to get over the hurdle to play it. Right,
True.
which means
Yes.
now when you're trying to decide what you want, and you're looking at all the different choices and so on. I think the decision is much easier when you're deciding what do I buy right now than it is to ask what do I play right now.
Yeah.
The nice thing is if you ask first what do I buy right now and then buy it, you're now adding that to your library. It's obvious that that's the thing you should be playing next. But even if you don't, your library is much smaller than the whole catalog, right?
Well, one thing we know is that actually a large proportion of games that are purchased on Steam are never played.
Yes.
That's true of a lot of my library.
Yeah. Like people will be like, oh yeah, I want to play this. And then they'll buy it because they get excited about it. And then they kind of check the time and they're like, oh, actually, no, I've only got like a half hour and then I got to go to bed.
Yeah,
So
and then like maybe 2 months go by and you still quite haven't gotten around to it, and then some other game comes out and you're like, oh, I want that
yeah.
one. So
And then pretty soon this thing is like 8 deep in your library.
This is
and you
actually why I
haven't
don't
touched
buy
it.
things on sale anymore, because I realize the only reason I buy those things is because they're on sale. Because again, the decision to buy is very easy. But then I almost never play those, because if I buy a game because I want to play it right now, if I actually make that decision first and then buy the game, that's the only chance in hell that I'm actually going to play a game.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question, because there's companies, like you said, Sam, doing subscriptions. There's companies trying to do streaming.
Popping up now.
And we get solicitations from a new like subscription or streaming company like on a weekly basis now. And it seems to be something that on the supply side, people are pushing.
Yes.
On the demand side, I still feel like it's actually not a good customer experience.
Well, I mean, maybe, but I think there's that really weird question though, which is that
But free always sounds like
Yes.
a good customer experience.
yeah. So I don't necessarily know that it will fail in the market. In fact, my guess would be
It's probably going to succeed.
probably going to succeed in the market,
Yeah.
but it's just going to be I don't know. It's just going to be an odd thing.
It's going to be one of those things where like now we all have our mindless queues of games, of infinite games that we can just go play at any moment, and it'll just devalue the whole gaming experience and actually make it harder to play games. Not because
because you
the
always
thing is like it's already like think about getting on your phone right now. You can this is already like your phone is already a subscription game device in the sense that
You have
you
infinite
buy a
free
phone
games.
right, and now you have infinite free
you
games.
pay for your mobile
You pay your mobile subscription
monthly
right?
bill.
So we already have that. And how many of those fucking games do you want to play?
Yeah.
Basically zero.
That's
of them,
true,
right?
actually.
Yeah. I think it turns them into
Commodities.
yeah.
They're just interchangeable.
It's just all the same.
You got
shit.
1,000 of them. They're just widgets,
Yep.
as opposed to like deep engaging experiences that you want to. And also, and I think there's that opportunity cost feeling of if you, like you said, Adam, you buy a game, that's the new game that you have.
Mhm.
So it feels like by committing to playing that, you're not really giving up much else because you only have the one new game.
Yep.
You don't have like 2 new games to play, which is also why when you buy a bundle, it feels weird because now you've got like 50 new Steam keys or something. And maybe you bought that bundle for like 1 or 2 games in there.
Yep.
But even if
And
it
for
was
$1 or $2,
yeah, and even if it was 2 games that you bought the bundle for, you may not play either because by playing one of them, you're committing to not playing the other one right now. And that kind of feels bad.
I think I've bought total with all the different Humble bundles I bought, which I don't buy anymore, but I easily added 100 games to my Steam library with all the Humble.
Yeah. As have I.
I swear I have not played any of them.
I saw.
I'm pretty sure I have played none of those games.
I saw Super Hot in my Steam library, and I don't know how I got it. I was like, I've been wanting to play this forever, and then you know what I did?
Didn't play
it. And it was already installed. Like I had at some point gotten it via a bundle or something.
Got it prepped,
and I had prepped it, and
so now all you had to do is hit play.
All I had to do was hit play, just like a Discord Nitro situation or whatever. And then I was just like, no.
Although I think if I saw Super Hot just like ready to go in my library, I probably would play it.
Because
the barrier to entry for that one seems so low.
That's true. It just shouldn't be.
And the payoff seems real high.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's one of the few that I think for me I would step right over that hurdle. But it is the case. Like my Steam library has 320 or whatever games in it, and every time I sit down, I think maybe I want to play games tonight.
Just games.
That's the problem. Is I sit down and I'm like, look at all these. I don't want to play any of these.
Yeah. Which is why I love getting into I have a few of my go-to games, like I'll play EVE Online or Rocket League or Kerbal Space Program or now Slay the Spire or something. And those games are so good and so deep that I could come back to them, after 6 months and play for 200 hours and get a very fulfilling experience, And what I also know is that by playing Super Hot or going onto Discord Nitro or any other subscription service or opening my phone and picking one of the billion free games, I'm giving up time in those games.
You're gambling. You're doing exploration, basically.
Yeah. And it's always risky. It's always costly. So even if it's quote free, right?
Well, I'm curious what our listenership has to say about these ideas of subscription models for games. Because of course we're just 3 people and we also make the games. So I'm curious.
We've got some biases. And we also grew up at a time when we had to spend $60 of our hard-earned mowing the lawn money once every several months when we would take a trip to Des Moines,
USA.
An hour away to go to Comp USA to look at the 10 PC games on the shelf. And
I don't think that informs us as much as just general human psychology.
It may not.
That's what I wonder.
Well, no, because in that paradox of choice, they talked about that the jam sampling experiment. Did you hear about this? It was like, they would set up a booth in front of a grocery store and they would have either like 20 something flavors of jam and you could sample any of them. And then if you wanted to buy one, then you could buy one. Right. And they all cost the same. And then they also had 6 flavors of jam in a separate setup. And what they found was that people were dramatically more likely to buy a jar or multiple jars when there were only 6.
And it'd probably be even more likely if there were only 2.
Yeah.
Probably.
And
I think if there's only one, like now you don't have a choice. And so it feels bad.
Somebody's like, do you want this jam? And you're like, I don't know. No. Leave me alone. Right. Yeah. And this is the same thing you see like people go into an ice cream store and like, can I sample this? Can I sample that? Can I sample this? Whatever. Yeah. Granted, they always buy the ice cream because it's ice cream.
Who's going to not buy ice cream?
Yeah.
Plus, you've now sampled it and you feel bad if you don't.
You owe debt.
Yeah. And so I think, there is that layer of it, which is that the more options you have, the more expensive it feels to pick one because now you're giving up every other possible option. And that's kind of what a subscription service does. Is it gives you a fuckload of options that you now all have access to. So
I'm curious about that either in the Discord or in which is at discord.gg/bscotch or via email. Let us know what you think about these things because it's going to happen this year. It's definitely happening this year as like a big thing people are always talking about. So
or over the next couple of years, as these things take off.
It's going to be the next wave of stuff I think that people are going to be into. So,
but is it good?
Is it good? I don't know. What do you think? Tell us.
We'll find out. All right, so that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bard, for making us sound good, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. If you would like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to beta.bscotch.net.
Also, we should rephrase that instead of if you would like to. Just fucking do it.
Just do it. It's 20 grind team.
20 grind team. Get in there.
Yeah. Quit being near the saddle and be on it.
Yeah.
I think that's the saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or just take the saddle off and just
jump on
you a horse.
Just be all natural.
Break in that wild stallion.
Also, also your hips. Yeah.
Yeah. Also break your hip.
Break-
You're breaking yourself in more than that stallion. I think.
Yeah,
at that
probably.
point.
Break a hip. That's what they say in the theater world.
Mhm.
You know. So instead of just peppering you with a billion links, we've got merch, we've got all this other stuff. It's all going to be there over at beta.bscotch.net. Click on the podcast button. You're good to go. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.